uh, very, very fine grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder. Ground mass is very fine. I'm going to step off the limb. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Humanity has been fascinated with space since our very conception. The study of our planet and the universe we inhabit has not only been a topic of scientific study, but also one of religious and historic importance. This eternal curiosity for what extends above our heads led us step by step to one giant leap. But how exactly did man end up on the moon? To answer this, it's important that we first understand what was happening on Earth at the time. Since the end of World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union were engaging in what was called the Cold War. Now, this wasn't a typical war. There was no direct fighting between the two countries, but instead it was more of a war of political ideologies. You know, communism is the root of all evil and all that jazz. A fight between democracy and communism. One way they fought was through proxy wars, in which the United States and the Soviets would support a country's fight against another, one country typically being democratic and the other communist. The Vietnam War and the Korean War are two great examples. However, the other primary way, and the one that's relevant to the topic at hand, was through a race of technological development. Each side wanted to prove that they had bigger and better technology in both consumer and military areas. Things like computers, color TV, penicillin, ballistic missiles, and much more were developed during this time. In fact, many innovations made by the military would find use in everyday appliances. As this was a competition to see which country could do or create things first, they were given names that reflected as much, notably the arms race, and then of course, the space race. In a contest of superiority, conquering the final frontier of space was an opportunity neither country could pass up. Kind of like the last slice of pizza, except, it's space, and instead of two people who want a little more food, it's two countries who can wipe every living thing off this planet. In 1955, the United States would announce their plans to launch an Earth-orbiting satellite. Then, in 1957, came the launch of Sputnik, the first major event of the space race and the world's first artificial satellite, launched by the Soviets. By using the missile technology they had developed in the arms race, the Soviets had won the first battle of the space race. The pressure was on the United States, but more was coming quickly. In November of the same year, the Soviets launched Sputnik 2, which carried the first living creature into Earth's orbit, Laika the dog. This sent a message to the world, and more specifically to the US, that the Soviets were capable of space travel, more importantly, that they had ballistic missiles capable of striking the United States.
We'll return after these messages.
What can a picture be? Well, it can be whatever you want it to be. It can be on paper, or not. It can be created and copied in minutes. A picture can be whatever you want it to be. Because now, Kodak gives you the power to take pictures further.
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
However, the United States would not stand idly by, and in January of 1958, they launched their own satellite, Explorer 1. Then, later that year, the US established the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which you may know as NASA. They might be very important in the coming years. The space race was truly a contest of firsts, and for pretty much all of it, the Soviet Union was dominated. Not only did they send the first satellite and living creature into orbit, but they followed that in 1959 with the first object to hit the moon, and in April of 1961 with the first human in orbit, Yuri Gagarin, and in 1963, the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova. The United States was taking L after L, and essentially played catch-up for most of the space race. In March of 1961, they would send a spacecraft carrying chimpanzees. It's kind of like that movie, Space Chimps. It's not a very good movie. Then, on May 5th, Alan Shepard became the first American to go to space, though not into orbit. That feat would belong to John Glenn, who orbited the Earth in February of 1962. The US was clearly able to accomplish the same as the Soviets, but to win, they needed to do what their enemy could not.
We'll return after these messages.
From the beginning, the life of a cook has never been easy. There was always something.
But now there's Ward's incredible microwave oven. It'll defrost, simmer, bake. It has a removable browning element. There's a temperature probe. Cooks a complete meal for 4 in less than an hour. It makes a cook's life easy. Of course, good help is still hard to find.
Speaking of the first object to hit the moon, what was that? Well, the Soviets launched a spacecraft by the name of Lunik or Luna 2. I don't know, would you like the Russian or the American way? Anyways, Luna 2 was the first man-made object to reach the moon, and it just so happened that the Soviets were doing a bit of an exhibit around other countries of their technological achievements. And guess what was on display in one of these exhibits? A fully functional and identical model of the Luna 2 spacecraft. So, the US decided to use their trap card, the CIA. The Luna 2 on display was disassembled, photographed, and reassembled in complete secrecy by a team of CIA agents, and the Soviets were none the wiser. Just one of many spy movie moments of the Cold War. To the United States, and likely to the rest of the world, the true winner of this competition would be whoever lands on the moon first. And in May of 1961, President John F. Kennedy would make a bold public announcement.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
To focus more on the US side for a bit, let's go back a little to 1959. In this year, NASA had selected the pilots to be the first Americans in space. The pioneers would be dubbed astronauts, derived from the Greek words astron, meaning star, and nauts, meaning sailor. These men would be involved in flights as part of Project Mercury, NASA's first series of efforts to send a man into space. Over the course of its projects, NASA would grow. A lot. Its budget was increased by 500%, and by the time of the lunar landing, there were around 34,000 NASA employees and 375,000 employees of university and industrial contract. Clearly, this program was important to America and the Soviets. After all, why go through this much effort just to prove you're better than another country? Well, that's just it. Neither side felt they could show any inferiority in science or military power, and they definitely didn't want to have their enemy be the first in history to land on the moon.
We'll return after these messages.
Sea turtles. They bury their eggs in some tropical beach. When the eggs hatch, the babies find their way to the water and across miles of ocean. Now, we also have this built-in sense of direction when we're in our own shells.
Cairn, the car navigation system from Philips Magnavox. It shows exactly how to get to where you want to go.
Man has finally caught up with nature.
Project Mercury was successful, but it seemed they weren't quite ready to move on to the final steps. It would be followed by Project Gemini from 1964 to 1966, a sort of intermediary step to prepare for the mission to the moon. During Project Gemini, the goal was to make the spacecraft more sophisticated and test the limits of human crews on long-duration flights. Astronauts part of Project Gemini would set record-length spacewalks and would also participate in the first successful docking in Spain. This was largely due to the improvement in technology during this period with the introduction of computers. Mind you, computers used to look more like arcade machines than they do to modern computers, and they also weren't really that powerful either, despite their size. But even though the most they could do was render a game of Pong, they were excellent calculators and could plot trajectories astronauts would use to enter orbit. This rapid period of testing would push the United States space technology further than ever. NASA then shifted to its final step, Project Apollo. While the US space program continued to grow, the same could not be said about the Soviets. Due to some internal conflict over the necessity of the program, because the Soviets had no money, and also the death of the chief engineer of their space program, Sergei Korolev, due to a botched surgery. Until the end of the space race, the Soviets would ultimately make 4 failed attempts at a lunar craft. The Soviets were out, but the US still had to reach where no man had ever gone before. On July 16, 1969, astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins set off on the Apollo 11 space mission. And on July 20th of 1969, mankind made history. In the culmination of not just the past 10 years of the space race, but the discoveries and innovation made by all of humanity in their quest for the stars, Apollo 11 and the astronauts on board became the first to land on the moon. Across America, this momentous occasion was displayed on television to an estimated 650 million people. And this was the voice that reached their ears from over 200,000 miles away.
I'm going to step off the limb. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Thus, the space race was essentially over, and the US was declared the winner. However, the Cold War would not end for another 20 years, and the technological advancements made in the race were used in the effort to keep ahead of one another. Satellite technology was especially useful, as it provided a way for the US to acquire images of the Soviets and potential missile threats when it would be otherwise very difficult or impossible to get. At the end of the day, the space race was nothing more than another political contest, one in which a race to the moon could prove the technological and military might of a world power. Though, I think it's important to understand that to the scientists and astronauts who worked tirelessly through it all, this likely meant a lot more than proving superiority to another country. Exploring and understanding space could be considered one of humanity's greatest dreams that has endured millennia. I wonder what it felt like for those men to stand on the moon, looking out onto the Earth they had spent their whole lives on. A view that no other person in history could say they had ever experienced. I doubt there could be a more profound sight.